Hello and welcome to the self study with Jess Temple. That's me. I'll be going through our workbook, breaking down days 11 through 20. Let's dive in. Okay, day 11, incremental goals create confidence. So, the majority of our perceived anxiety stems from the lack of goals or direction. Based on childhood patterning, we tend to either avoid goal setting, remain intentionally detached from outcomes, or we set goals that are completely impossible to measure so that we can constantly change them to feel like we're failing. In today's lesson, it teaches us the importance of goal setting as well as the importance of setting the incremental goals that can be measured and tracked to build sustainable confidence. Incremental means a small change in quantity or function. We will learn how to use incremental goals in our daily and weekly agenda to help our brain tangibly align with our transformation as well as begin to align with a new set of beliefs and mindset shifts. Confidence is either created during childhood or it's not by the way that our parents balance their structured praise system by teaching us how to accurately self measure. Many of us who struggle with feeling worthy, good enough, or consistently seek external validation will be looking for these early childhood patterns for input output relationships. So, when most of us think of goals, we go immediately to the big ones, the life changes, relationship status updates, and job promotions. The truth is that we would all be better served by having more goals that are clearly defined and incremental as opposed to the big picture. So, for example, when you think of the week ahead, what is one goal that you could align yourself with and when focused on could create meaningful change? I'm a mom of four, two boys and two girls. I run multiple businesses and have relationships that deserve my undivided attention when time permits. If I were to look at my week and how I'm organizing it with the goal of I want to retire by 40, that's going to drastically alter the way I approach my week compared to I want to be well prepared for appointments, be present every day with the kids, and make sure I spend time connecting with my partner before we go to bed. The latter is an incremental goal, and while it might not be directly related to my big goal of retiring by 40, it certainly helps me to create a stable and emotionally connected environment at home that enables me to perform better at work. We often set ourselves up for failure by either not setting a goal at all or setting one only the big picture goals that typically make us feel like we're not doing anything right. So, focusing our energy on incremental goals will change our lives immediately. I gave the example of setting a weekly goal that is easily measured, but we can also do this on a daily or monthly scale as well. When we're clear on how we're defining success for that day or week, it makes it easier for us to align our thoughts, behavior, and our decisions with where we want to go. If I have a day where my goal is focused around reorganizing my office and paying all my bills, but I don't quantify this, I might easily get pulled in a few opposing directions with my kids or with creative projects, only to be left feeling like a failure at the end of the day. On the other hand, if I approach my day with this reorganization and bill paying goal on the top of my mind, and better yet, written down, I can easily see what things require me to say no, not at this time, or need to delegate it to someone else. Without a clear, intended destination, we're unable to create a viable measuring stick for success. Okay, here we're looking at the page in your book titled Incremental Goals Fieldwork. So here you're going to fill this out to the best of your ability. What are the three themes that keep coming up in your workbook? For example, lack of trust in others, fear of rejection, or getting it wrong, not being perfect, people leaving me out or not following through, disorganization leading to chaos, blaming other people to displace responsibility. Write the theme here. This is the number one. Commit to one small, measurable, incremental goal to prove to yourself that theme one is not the rule, but an exception. Theme two, write this here. Commit to one small, measurable, incremental goal to prove to yourself that theme two is not the rule, but the exception. Repeat for the third. So remember that an incremental goal is a small, measurable goal strategically created to help disprove your source belief pattern or your trigger response. Example for not trusting others would be I will ask my partner to plan a date this week, no later than whatever the date is, without trying to ask questions about it or micromanaging them. Example for disorganization, creating chaos. I will clean up my desk and get organized each time I sit down at my desk to work for the next 7 days. An example for blaming other people to displace responsibility. I will actively use Eli to stop snapping at my partner, blaming him for my own emotions for 7 days. An example for obsession with perfection. I will try 3 new things this week to practice being okay with doing things wrong and being a beginner. Do not forget the importance of quantifying the frequency and the time frame for your commitment. So, the big takeaway for day 11 is that most people actually avoid goals because they don't know how to properly craft or measure them. That all changes today. You'll learn how incremental goals can help boost your productivity, self worth, and eventually add up to the achievement of big goals, which are covered later in the book. The fieldwork for today helps you to create powerful, incremental goals from themes that you've extracted in your workbook. You'll learn how important it is to call out faulty assumptions that masquerade as rules in your mind. You'll pair these two concepts to craft measurable, incremental goals that directly disprove these faulty assumptions. Use the examples on the right hand side of the page to get your wheels turning, but don't simply copy one of them and keep going. Take the time to craft your own personal examples. Okay, here we are on day 12. Healthy eating and sleep lowers your baseline stress levels. Shout it from the mountaintop. I'm so excited for this day. This topic is something I'm very passionate about. So many of you may have purchased this book to sift through and manage your emotional inventory. However, your nutrition and sleep matter more than you could ever imagine. Your baseline stress level can predispose you to erratic and destructive emotional responses and deeply impact anxiety and depression. I wouldn't be doing my job if I let this conversation slip through the cracks. The truth is, you can follow every step in this book and make massive strides towards emotional stability and a thriving life. But if some of your symptoms are rooted in your body's inflammatory response, they have to be addressed in this fashion. It is my belief through years of this work and thousands of students, that every single one of you stands to gain an entire new echion of health and wellness by tweaking a few lifestyle habits. And yes, even you who already perceive that you eat healthy. If you have anxiety, depression, fatigue, brain fog, bloating, rashes, or frequent headaches, something isn't right. It's not supposed to be like that. I can teach you how to consciously override your childhood patterning, but we also have to heal your body so that it stops working against us. Did you know that the way that you subconsciously approach nutrition and wellness can be a direct result of your childhood input output? Today, we'll explore lifestyle habits and how they play into your emotional response patterns. It's true. Everyone wants a better quality of life, but very few are willing to take the time to honestly assess how they're fueling their body. Are you fueling inflammation and stress responses physically and emotionally, or are you taking the actions required to lower baseline stress and inflammation? Do you want to be healthy and fit, but you still eat like crap and smoke pot every night to help you fall asleep? These are all lifestyle choices that we have to come to terms with sooner than later. You might perceive that what you choose to eat and what vices you choose to participate in are your choice. And right as a human being, true. But what if you were to find out that these choices aren't exactly choices, but instead products of your subconscious brain patterns? Would you be open to shifting out of them? Many of you hold on to your food and lifestyle behaviors like a childhood blankie. As soon as someone tries to talk to you about it, walls go up. The truth is that these lifestyle choices not only play into your cycles of self sabotage, they usually also perpetuate your source belief patterns. Owning up to the truth of how you play out these is lifestyle choices is the first step. Whether you smoke pot, smoke cigarettes, drink too much, eat fast food, or try all the fad diets for 3 days until you eventually drive to Krispy Kreme, the writing is on the wall. You need to be able to own up to these patterns and have the courage to face them with radical personal responsibility and dig into resolving them with the tools presented in this book. You will learn how to observe and define the lifestyle choices in this section, then learn how to rewire them effectively in a subsequent lesson. It is my hope that by owning the behavior and acknowledging the negative impact it has on your body and life trajectory, that you'll be able to stop and ask yourself the question before you do it. Is this aligned with where I want to go? Is this choice productive to my healing or does it hold me back? Okay, on this page, our lifestyle choices field work, you're going to be checking all that currently apply. Whether you smoke pot, cigarettes, recreational drugs, drink alcohol, eat fast food or processed food, yo yo diet, binge eat, purge, compulsive snacker, not enough sleep or poor sleep, habits don't prioritize personal hygiene. Ask yourself, did your parents or your primary caregivers have the same or similar or drastically different lifestyle habits as you? Does this bring up pride, disgust, apathy, or frustration? What lifestyle choices hold you back the most? What's the biggest roadblock or hurdle to changing it? Make 3 lifestyle commitments for the next 7 days and set one big goal for yourself around lifestyle habits to revisit at the end of the workbook. Okay, big takeaway, day 12. So, no workbook exercise is going to combat perpetual bad habits that damage your overall health and wellness. This is your chance to take responsibility for the behaviors that you know are not benefiting you in any way. If you struggle with anxiety, depression, or any chronic symptoms, you owe it to yourself to be honest here and follow the steps to get out of your own way. Our field work for today, most people find clever ways to own their bad habits, like justify them as a choice or something that they do on purpose. This is your chance to admit the truth. Did your exercise turn into a justification and now into a part of your life that just is? Is the choice truly in your best interest? Even though it's going to be hard, call out the truth in your fieldwork commitments today. Do not let your justification have any time on the microphone. Day 13, memory tracks and dog whistles. So, when we understand the process of memory encoding, we become better able to understand the critical moments that impact and define our adult outcomes. Memory encoding takes place both implicitly and explicitly. Implicit memory is one of 2 types of long term memory. Implicit memories are created passively or completely unconsciously, and they deeply impact and control our behavior and thoughts. Explicit memory, by contrast, is consciously encoded, meaning it's committed to memory on purpose. So many of these memories or moments we recall are not stored as we experience them, but instead stored as they were told to us. This creates a distinct problem. Our subconscious and our conscious memories can be in conflict with each other, and they often are. So, what's the solution? To utilize break method protocols to silence the fight between implicit and explicit memory and expedite the truth above all else. And yes, even when your protective reflexes kick in and try to slam on the brakes. Subconscious memory encoding can be challenging to address through traditional methods. It can be difficult to isolate related inputs and outcomes without the proper tools. You're in luck though, because that's our specialty in break method. Dog whistles, when sounded, cannot be consciously heard by humans, yet the action was taken and the whistle was indeed sounded. While we're not consciously aware of the moment being recorded, it is taking place in recording data nonetheless. In today's lesson, we will be addressing implicit memory inputs and their potential conflict with stories you've been told or memories that your parents or siblings may have tried to reposition. Think of the moments that your parents said, "It didn't happen like that. Why are you always exaggerating? It happened like this." Well, eventually, they do it to you so many times that you begin to adopt their version instead of remembering your own experience. Additionally, You might not have any conscious memories of anything traumatic tied to a specific song, yet the song could turn on and your body could react with a trauma response that feels conflicting. Consciously, you have no idea why you're losing it, but your body resonates with the memory. You can see how difficult it can be to get conscious and subconscious mind operating congruently. That's where break method comes in. Today's exercise will help you extract potential areas of memory conflict, the places that you consciously feel like you want to be in a relationship, for instance, but your subconscious does everything it can to push away or avoid relationships. The moment you want to be included and accepted, but your subconscious lashes out and says a bunch of stuff to get you rejected. It's in these conflicting directives that we create the most inner turmoil. The things that we want the most, we constantly run away from or destroy. We are then left with the question, why do I do this to myself when I just want to be happy? You're doing it because you don't know how not to. You're doing it because your subconscious is still dominating your behavior and the illogical beliefs stored there have not yet been rewired. In order to transform our emotional response patterns, we must isolate the faulty messages or memories that have impacted our subconscious. We can then target them with actions to rewire in a very strategic way. The end result, a subconscious mind that isn't always out to get you. Okay, so you've heard of it by now. This is our first exercise in directed storytelling. So, this is where we get to the truth. So you're going to go in and fill in the blanks, and yours is going to look a little different than this. I have a little bit of editing to do in here. Today, my life is blank, fill in the blank, and today is different than or the same as circle one any other day in my life. When I think about my life, there are three moments that stand out. The three pivotal decisions I made or moments in my life that brought me here are fill in these blanks. So, this may be difficult for some of you, but you're going to be finding this information as a theme in the previous days. So, what is coming up consistently? Take a look at the note at the bottom left hand. Are these emotions, memories, or experiences similar to the themes and categories that have been prevalent on previous exercises? Likely. If so, write down the most obvious similarity below. Big takeaway day 13, you are as affected by what you don't know that you know as what you do know that you know. Your memory has different layers of encoding, implicit and explicit. Today, you're going to learn what gets stored where and how it's used to guide or influence your behavior on a daily basis. The fieldwork here uses break method process called directed storytelling to extract relevant data from the hard drive of your subconscious. This process stops you from being able to direct your own story, thus infusing your pattern and subjective perception into the memory recall. The benefit? You cut through the BS and find the information that is actually holding you back. Bonus, it's done in a way that can be readily assimilated into a pattern that you can understand. This process might feel strange because it silences the fight between the amygdala and the hippocampus temporarily. The end result might look like a conflicting information on the page, and that is usually a good sign. The way you explicitly remember something is often at odds with the way your implicit memory encodes something. You will be looking for these inconsistencies to help you understand your pattern. Here we are, 2 weeks in, day 14, almost halfway through. All right, emotional homeostasis. Everybody's got one. So each of us operates with a three-part emotional addiction cycle. This cycle is directly linked to the subconscious rules that we learn and adopt as safety protocols during childhood. We might believe currently that we are just this way or that it runs in the family and that there's no way to fix it. While it's normal to feel this way and it seems easier to decide it's unfixable, the truth is that it can be rewired, and doing so will change your life forever. Our childhood brains between the ages of birth and 5 already anchor in their first steps in this three-part cycle, the origin response. So when a child comes into the world, they're not yet jaded or used to the pain and suffering of the world around them. A baby can't rationalize that mom is taking an extra long time to change her diaper because she's had a stressful day at work. The baby brain, unfortunately, is much less forgiving than that. It's easy for a child to encode deep fear or shame responses in the early years without many obvious trauma crescendos in their lives. Today, we explore the creation of emotional homeostasis and establish an accurate baseline for the emotions that we default to the most often. When we experience our environment and the people in it, our brain attempts to rapidly define environmental stimuli. With each definition assigned, an emotional response is created in the form of a neurotransmitter. The body floods with neurotransmitter, and we subsequently experience an emotional sensation throughout the body. The emotions that we experience with the highest frequency during childhood set the stage for the formation of our emotional homeostasis. Homeostasis is a self regulating process by which biological systems attempt to maintain stability while adjusting to conditions. As we age, our body dynamically adjusts to our new environment in an attempt to constantly bring us back to its emotional homeostasis. It is important for us to understand emotional homeostasis as well as where it comes from in order to determine how to approach rewiring. For example, if it was created by having to walk on eggshells and constantly fear people's responses, that person is likely adapted to an experience of fear to anxiety loop to protect themselves. A person can also experience shame masked as discipline or religious dogma pushing them to turn to guilt as a protective response. Another distinct pattern can be tied to experiencing acute trauma, injustice, or chaos, and letting the fear of that chaos quickly turn to anger as a method of advocacy or sticking up for themselves. There are a variety of ways that these patterns can be expressed, and we will determine what repetitive environment stimuli shaped your origin emotional response. Once we establish this emotion, it becomes much easier for us to determine what faulty assumptions you're likely to make that contribute to your self sabotage, as well as your relationship behavior, communication style, and decision making. In order to do this, we have to do a summary of the overall emotional experience in your early environment, not the one off crescendo moments. Okay, here we have an example emotional timeline. You'll be filling your own out, but this will give you a good idea. So, the origin is the initial pain or the suffering stimulus that's perceived as repetitive, adverse reaction to your childhood environment. So the example is that mom and dad were always leaving without warning. It always felt like parents were lying, not giving enough information to make me feel safe, mixed with yelling and threatening and always being with the nanny. So the emotional response to the stimulus is fear. And then it turns to anxiety, ages 5 to 10. So we've got our protective mechanisms. So, to protect yourself from the pain and suffering stimulus, describe behavior, voice tone, body language, and decision making tendencies. So, the example is I'd always try to figure out what people were hiding, interrogate, and not trust adults and adult caregivers. Always trying to avoid being left behind. Lots of questions, lots of clingy behavior. So, this is the emotional response to protection. Now we have the fuck it response. So, despite protective measures, you can't escape the pain and suffering. Describe your behavior, voice tone, body language, decision making tendencies when you've given up. So, I started to push my parents away and act out with anger, rebellion, always staying at friends' houses, avoidance, checking out on academics, self destructing behavior, and risky behavior. And this was when I was just completely angry. This is the fuck it response. Go ahead and complete your emotional timeline, fill in the blanks. If you need any help with any of this, you can book a Saturday or Sunday 30-minute session and we'll go through this. Day 14, big takeaway. What you experience with the highest frequency during childhood sets the stage for what your body craves to recreate in childhood. Through emotional homeostasis, your body becomes addicted to the emotions that you experience the most. Today's exercise helps you understand what repetitive experiences set the stage for the formation of your emotional homeostasis. It is important to remember here that repetitive pain and suffering equals how you experience your parents' responses to your needs being met, how they showed love and affection, how they communicated with you and with each other, overall emotional climate. Example, even if you were well cared for, but there was constant yelling in the background, this top left box is not a one off singular event. It is a summary of what your emotional environment was like as a child. So remember, a child is not jaded or used to the world around them. Everything hurts. So stop telling yourself that your childhood was great or pretty good and cheat yourself on this assignment. Anything that doesn't feel like love, curiosity, or innocence is going to register as pain to your brain. Okay, so the bottom boxes are for your emotional responses. Origins on the left, how you initially responded to the adverse repetitive events. Protectives in the middle, how your brain adapted to try and keep you safe or avoid the repetitive adverse events. And fuck it is the emotion that you defaulted to when you've given up on trying and you're willing to blow it up, shut down, or walk away. Don't write word answers on this top section, please. You paid to be here, so use your time wisely and don't cheat yourself on this assignment. It's one of the most important assignments of the entire course. If you're the type that struggles with early childhood memory, remember to think of who your parents were. Were they calm? Were they easily agitated? Did they have you really young and probably not know what they were doing? Did they drink or do drugs? Stop trying to look back at this with your adult perspective or to wait until some gleaming, well packaged, specific memory comes to you. This isn't about that. This is about trying to make an educated guess about what the emotional and relational environment was like during early childhood. Day 15, Life Audit 101. So, did you know that you can learn a lot about yourself by how your brain quickly summarizes information? In fact, for a highly skilled diagnostician, this format typically contains the most useful and accurate data. When you are asked to shorten, condense, and get to the point of a variety of topics, the diagnostician can see a pattern emerge. Learning to see and understand the pattern is the key to it all. Life audits allow you to summarize your snapshot truth on a number of areas that relate to your life, from emotions to partnership to parenting to body image. When we hit the brain with rapid fire, short answer directives, we often remove one layer of narrative BS. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't still BS yourself on today's exercise, although you'll have every reminder of how not to let this happen. In this work, I found that people complete this task, look at it, call BS on themselves, and then reprint this page and go deeper. The good news is that every life audit should be kept for future use, even the ones that you think are BS. Even your BS has a pattern. When we force ourselves to extract succinct, summarized information, we avoid getting trapped in an emotional narrative. In order to conduct your first life audit, it's important that you remove any aspirational answers or answers that are influenced by societal norms. Many of you reading this, whether you like to admit it or not, do not like the idea of raw truth staring back at you on the page. For example, what if you're married and your ex from years ago is always on your mind, even though you consciously wish it wasn't the case? Are you going to own this truth on your page, or are you going to lie to yourself so there's no proof? Your brain will make quick and frequent attempts to claim something that you wish was true, but in reality is not. You may also ignore that which is true and put something else in its place. Humans lie to themselves all the time to get by, and this exercise will be no different. You'll have to hold yourself to a high standard of truth throughout this whole process. When we talk about societal norms influencing your answers, this could be something like believing you're a bad spouse if you don't put your spouse in number one position on some of these lists, or feeling like you have to put some belief about intimate partnership that sounds good but deep down isn't true. This is the time to cut the shit. On life audits, we only benefit by putting down the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The truth is often muddy with a combination of things we knowingly claim and things we know have been implicitly passed on to us by our culture, religion, or general upbringing. You may carry beliefs about an intimate partnership and gender roles, and you don't consciously believe that they're true, but continually sneak up on you, leading you to internal resentment. You may also hold back implicit beliefs about what it means to be a parent that you don't consciously think are true, but influence your parental guilt in the background. These are the type of snapshot answers that we're looking for in today's exercise. I usually refer to these answers as quick and dirty. Don't overthink your responses and don't let your brain go back and edit what's on the page. Print out a new page so that you have versions rather than one copy with edits. This version will help you to see the trajectory of your own pattern. Turn to day 2 to snag your list of the top 5 friends and family influencers. Unless you already need to do an update, same rules apply as day 2 to determine the who and in what order. Alrighty, here's your life audit page. So you're going to go ahead and fill in the blanks. Top 5 friends and family influencers, the most common conflict topics, the most common emotions, and most common beliefs about yourself. Okay, so here we're going to score our life audit. So you're going to choose one pen and draw an arrow from the top friends and family to each of the emotions that they activate. It's likely going to be many of your top 5. Be as neat as you can with your arrows. Step 2, choose a different color pen and draw an arrow from the top 5 friends and family and the most common conflicts that you experience with that person. Again, be as neat as you can with the arrows. If any of these conflicts are strictly in your head without another person being involved, place an asterisk next to the conflict. Step 3, choose a new color pen, draw an arrow from the most common conflicts to the emotion that you feel when the conflict arises. Be as neat as you can with your arrows. Step 4, look at all arrows moving toward the emotion. You should have 2 sets of arrows to tally. Tally the number of total arrows moving towards each emotion. Each individual emotion should therefore receive a numerical value. Place this value in the shaded left side column to the left of the top 5 emotion section. Highlight or underline in a new color the emotion that has the highest numerical value. So, which person activates the most emotions? Which conflict activates the most emotions? And which belief about self, when activated, brings you back to the highest numerical value emotion? The big takeaway here is that you can learn a lot about yourself through the making of quick snapshot lists. Like directed storytelling, which blocks your brain from leaning into its subjective narrative, crafting quick lists helps your brain hone in on the snapshot truth. It also helps you gather useful lists to use for pattern assimilation. The exercise is sure to set you off if you fear rejection, disappointment, or try to do everything perfectly. Make sure to follow the fieldwork directions, but also don't let yourself overthink this. This isn't supposed to take a long time. This isn't supposed to be obsessed over, read into, or analyzed at length. Keep it simple. The quick and dirty answer on these is usually going to be the right one. On exercises like the right one is the most authentic or accurate in this moment. It shouldn't be based on social norms or anything aspirational. It won't do you much good to write a bunch of answers the way you wish you were or how you portray them to people around you. We need to have the truth here. For example, some of you might be really good at hiding your anxiety or turning your anger into a festering pot of frustration. Just because you've adapted to learn how to hide them doesn't mean that they don't exist. We need to know what's really going on up there. On beliefs about self, remember that this will sound illogical and self critical. Some of the examples would be I always mess things up. Everyone always leaves me. I'm not pretty enough. I don't know how to do anything right. I can't trust myself. People always leave me or make me feel invisible, or something similar to these. When you write them down, it won't feel good. It might even feel shameful, but you can't rewire that which you refuse to acknowledge. Here we are, day 16, anchors versus accelerators. This is the friends and family audit. So it's super common to have friendships and associations on the roster that have lasted for many years. The question that we'll be asking today is Have those friends and associations evolved with us at a relative pace, away from us, or stayed in the same dysfunctional place that they were when we first became friends? This is certainly not about callously cutting people out of our lives. Our goal is simply to shine a flashlight on the relationships that bring out and amplify our best qualities instead of push our buttons, making us default to our early 20s. No offense to anyone doing this workbook in your early 20s. You'll understand when you're older. We will be introducing new language and intentional measuring stick to help evaluate if certain associations are helping us navigate towards our goals efficiently, slowing us down, or blocking us completely. We will address the proper way to navigate the relationship boundary and communication adjustments that need to take place to skyrocket you to the next phase. It's important to be aware of the associations that propel you forward and activate your best, and those that keep you stuck aligning with an outdated version of yourself. So, there are times when we're aligned with certain people or associations, and our whole life trajectory seems to blast off. Then we have other times where we default back to old friends, exes, or gossipy coworkers, and it all starts to fall apart. As you've learned in day two, you are who you surround yourself with. Even those of us that are mindful of boundaries can still get yanked into the worst version of ourselves in the sneakiest of ways. That's why today we learn how to identify people that anchor us versus those who accelerate us towards our destiny. Now, you've likely heard of the term anchor and accelerator and thought, aren't those both good? No. We use the term anchor in this way. Imagine you're a train speeding towards your destination and you throw an anchor off the back into the tracks. What would happen? Would you slow down, break down, stop completely? Today, we learn a simple formula that helps us decide if someone has an anchoring effect on our trajectory or an acceleratory one. In order to determine who is an anchor or accelerator, please grab your list of associations from day two. If you feel they need to be updated, you can feel free to update them before you begin. The first step in this process is imagining that your life is a train. Now, I want you to think about where you are going. What are you currently working toward? What are your priorities? What does that destination look like when you put everything together? I'll give you a few examples before it's your turn. This one is from Busy. Today, my train is heading towards being the best mother of three children I could possibly be while also prioritizing my relationship. A year ago, that direction would have been very different. I wouldn't have been pregnant, my older kids wouldn't have been fairly self sufficient, and I would have stated a bunch of business goals very clearly with no hesitation. I give you this contrast because we need to be able to update these accurately from time to time. Sometimes things change and we shift our focus. A train heading 200 miles per hour toward family goals looks very different than one heading the same speed towards business goals. So your destination is, and your train speed is what? Person one's destination is, and their speed is what? So take note that you're making an educated guess here. No one is asking you to go talk to them about this. And even if you did, they'd probably make something up. Use your discernment here. And you're using your top five associations from day two for the next 5 pages. In this, you're defining their speed. The scale for this exercise is 0 to 300. So you're only going to check one and make sure their speed is in relation to your specific destination. So 300 miles per hour looks like you're incredibly organized and aligned with all the right people and associations to get there. Your bad habits resolved and your mind is clear. You're ready to rock. 200 miles per hour looks like this. You know where you're going, and you're currently in the process of setting up these associations, resolving bad habits, and trying to stop the mental chatter that leads you to self sabotage. 100 miles per hour looks like you know where you're going, but your life is not currently organized or prioritized for success. You're not associated with people that help you level up, and you don't even know who those people could be. You're actively still allowing self sabotage to bite you in the ass. 0 miles per hour looks like you don't know where you want to go. You don't know what you want to do. And the thought of trying to get organized or aligned with other people or big goals makes you want to shit your pants. And you'll repeat this for person two, person three, person 4, and person 5. So in this page, you're going to list out your anchors and accelerators. Remember that an accelerator is going to be a person that's heading in the same or complementary direction as you, going the same speed or faster than you. An anchor is going to be someone going in the opposite direction as you or going slower than you by at least 100 miles per hour. The big takeaway: the people that you spend your time with or mentally plugged into often hold the keys to your success or failure. It's critical that you honestly evaluate how your relationship has evolved over time and decide whether you are evolving together or in a compatible direction. When you desire to change your life and repattern your emotional response system, you have to factor in how other people influence you both implicitly and explicitly. Today's exercise helps you to quantify where you're heading and how organized you are and the tools required to get you there. You then become able to match that against the top 5 people that you spend the most time with or energy thinking about. When you can paint a clear picture of who accelerates your progress to a better life and identify who holds you back, you can craft an effective strategy to reach your goals. If you let people subconsciously influence you to back down on your goals or lean into self sabotage, you'll constantly struggle with generating forward momentum in your life. Today is all about identifying who needs to interact with you in a different way or with new boundaries to not derail your efforts to transform your life. Day 17, exploring triggers, the obvious, the sneaky, and the what the fuck. So we all know that certain people set us off. We know that certain family members or holiday gatherings are sure to put our emotional intelligence to the test. But are we sure those are the only triggers we experience? Many of the triggers in our environment range from the subtle to the bizarre and everything in between. Today, we will explore the sneaky and the subversive nature of emotional triggers. Now that we have a handle on the emotional responses that we experience with the highest frequency, we begin the process of isolating which environmental triggers link to these emotional responses. As we dig into today's lesson, keep in mind trigger patterns don't want to be found, called out, or identified. They want to stay hidden, keeping us trapped in our cycle to stay safe. Remember, to the brain, safety is simply defined as known cause and effect based rules that are learned during childhood. You're here to rewire the rules entirely. Not all trigger responses follow a tick tick boom pattern. The most chaotic triggers are the ones that fly under the radar. Big takeaway, day 17. It's common to think of a trigger as something obvious and loud, when the truth is, most of the things that trigger you are actually subtle or occur just before you realize that you're about to explode. Today's micro lesson teaches you how to step back and see the sneaky triggers that do the heavy lifting in regard to your adverse emotional responses. Today's fieldwork uses a specific tool that's called directed meditation. This process helps you to connect to your subconscious in a productive way. Please follow the directions on the fieldwork page and remember that this might take a few tries. This tool can be incredibly useful to your healing process, but it's like building a muscle. You have to use it and build up the skill. The more you tell yourself, I can't meditate, the harder this is going to be. This type of meditation is not like transcendental meditation or Zen meditation. This is more akin to a form of self hypnosis. The goal is to direct the brain to supply us with a specific area of information that matches our inquiry. This information might flow in pictures, symbols, or play in our mind like a movie. The purpose is to help you arrive at the deep subconscious answers that hold the key to your healing. Remember that even after you write down your takeaways from the experience, the information may still be lingering in the somatic layers of your body. This can lead to new epiphanies, and it can also make you feel a bit on edge or in a heightened state of emotion. Ride the wave and keep honing the skill of directed meditation. In the end, the information that you're trying to extract is simple. What childhood age is holding you back the most right now? Some of you tend to get trapped in a cycle of telling yourself that you don't have any memories. The findings of today's session allows you to tune into a specific age and dig into everything that happened in that particular year. Any big changes at home, with parents, with friends, with your sense of self? Was anything pivotal in that it changed your way of thinking about something? You can then use this information to understand where some of your pivotal brain patterns were anchored in. Day 18, exploring triggers, relationships. Relationship triggers will be more defined than the previous day's exercise. We will use the broad and sneaky themes from day 17 to see how these themes relate to more detailed experiences in your relationship cycles. Relationships have a tendency to bring out the best and worst in all of us. They also have a tendency to make us show up one way in the beginning stages of a relationship and then a drastically different way after the relationship is perceived as secure. Today, we will be digging into what stages of relationship trigger us, along with what relationship conflicts and communication patterns. We will also be taking a look at what our past relationships have in common. As we know from previous micro lessons, our brain seeks out opportunities to play out childhood emotions and belief patterns. One of the ways this takes place is to trick us into selecting different partners that, in many ways, are sadly exactly the same. We've all been there. I swear this one is different. Then, 6 months later, we have a face the reality. Either they're the same as everyone else, or we incite this behavior pattern in intimate relationship partners.
One of the glaringly obvious themes around relationship triggers is commitment. How each brain approaches commitment is based on their source belief pattern formed during childhood. Often, those who generally lack trust in people show up or follow through, go into relationships one of three ways. They dive headfirst with full commitment and presence as the relationship starts, only to then detach and lose interest once the relationship is secure. Two, they go into a relationship with deep codependence and constant fear of the person leaving or cheating, sometimes leading to stalking type behaviors. Three, they avoid relationships entirely because they never work out anyway. This type stays detached and typically creates reasons why the person is not to be trusted. Psst, it's a you problem too. Those who fixate more on the feedback loop, like not feeling worthy, attractive enough, constantly trying to measure up, or assume they'll be rejected, tend to go into relationship commitment in these ways. Enjoys the fantasy and idea of a relationship more than the actual relationship. They may enjoy the process of getting the partner, but once there's any sort of depth or vulnerability required, they start to self sabotage. They also might perceive themselves as having trouble with commitment. Two, they want to be in a real relationship, but often sabotage the early stages with personality or communication expression that pushes the person away. Three, desires to be in a relationship but can't get past social anxiety or reclusiveness to ever truly put themselves out there, anyways. Let's see what your relationship triggers are around commitment. Relationship commitment trigger field work. So you're going to check the box that best describes you. So when it comes to relationship commitment, you're either going to choose A, you fall in love easily and deeply. Typically, you're going to go all in from the start. Only after the relationship has been solid for a lengthy period of time do you start to notice that you detach, get distracted, or lose interest. Sometimes you don't even want to feel this way, it just happens. Check B, if you want to be in a relationship so badly that you get into the wrong ones. You're often not even that into the person, but you stick it out for a while. You compartmentalize, people please, and become whoever you think they want you to be. Usually, you let this go on for way too long. Maybe you're not very committed. You're just scared to be alone. Check C, if you hang on to independence as long as possible, and even if you like the person a lot. You have a heart to fight hard to be all in on a relationship. You like your time alone. You struggle with being in partnership because of this. In your relationship, your fights are usually about you being selfish or not vulnerable. Check D if you immediately get codependent in relationships, even if you try not to. You lose yourself and you become obsessive. This can mean stalking your ex on social media, checking their phone, or needing to ask a million reassuring questions. This inevitably pushes them away or creates toxicity. Check E if you want to be in a relationship, but you seem to always be single. You struggle with prioritizing social events, friendships, or going places where you could meet someone. You don't want to be alone, but you usually are. We're about to learn what source belief pattern aligns with each relationship commitment type. It's important here that you follow the directions and do not select more than one. If you look back over the course of all of your adult relationships, what is the most common way you went into a relationship and behaved during the stages discussed in the exercise? Take note if your brain is trying to do well, there was that one time. That's your brain's protective mechanism blocking you from getting to the truth and rewiring. We aren't talking about the one time or the phase that you went through from 20 to 25. We're talking about your general relationship MO as an adult. So write the commitment type at the top of the page that you most identified with, and we'll dive into each of the types a little bit more. So A types typically follow the abandonment source belief pattern. They are secure in themselves and they don't fear rejection from other people because they don't trust anyone's opinion anyways. This makes it easy to go all in. Where this type struggles is in learning to cultivate trust and vulnerability with their partner. Their brain will do everything it can to block this from happening. This is when the detachment sets in. It's easier for your brain to detach than to learn how to trust that the other person won't lie, cheat, or leave. It's common for these types to have grown up holding it together for everyone else's chaos or being the peacekeeper. B types typically follow the rejection source belief pattern. They learn to people please during childhood to either get attention, avoid discipline, or to seek love and validation. Their brain will frequently lead them into relationships that aren't truly the right fit for them, in turn, forcing them to people please and perform. They are so looped into people pleasing and validation cycle that they often let relationships like this go on until the other person ends it. Then we're looking at C type, and they can either be abandonment or rejection. Although we do not explore adaptive source beliefs in this workbook series due to the short 30-day learning period, we will drop you a little hint here to continue to follow. C-type abandonment source beliefs typically have an adaptive source belief centered around needing to control outcomes or people. Unlike A-types, whose adaptive belief centers are surround around holding together other people's chaos and being the peacekeeper, C types will always have a certain amount of distance or independence that their brain tells them that they need to be safe. C types with rejection source beliefs also control via their adaptive source belief. They see the control the way that they are perceived, experienced, and loved. It always has to be on their terms. All C types are resistant to spontaneity on behalf of the partner, even if they're able to enjoy spontaneity by themselves. D types most commonly have abandonment type, with a very specific adaptive source belief pattern that demands they be in control to be safe. Unlike A types with abandonment, who are addicted to holding together other people's chaos, D types will become obsessive with needing information, validation, clarification, and reassurance. In rare cases, D types can have rejection source belief. However, their adaptive response will not simply be centered around desiring control regarding the way that they're perceived. These pattern types will desire to micromanage or fixate on small aspects of daily life. E-types follow a very specific arc of the rejection pattern. They experience their brain's desire to control the way that they are perceived in a way that leads them to be reclusive or not prioritize social opportunities to date. These types will likely perceive either social anxiety or some type of workaholism that allows them to excuse their reclusivity. In rare cases, this type can be abandonment type. They would follow the workaholism pattern, using their business as a constant excuse to never let someone in. For E-types, learning to trust and be vulnerable with others is often perceived as one of the scariest parts of life. Use what you know about E-like questions and incremental goals to build one clear, measurable goal around your relationship commitment pattern this week. An example is when you feel disconnected or detached from your partner this week, I can commit to asking myself the Eli question: is there something I can do to build trust with my partner? Can I open the door to something vulnerable rather than letting my heart keep detaching?
Big takeaway day 18. Relationship commitment is a trigger issue for everyone. You're not all going to respond to the trigger in the same way, but you're all going to respond in a pattern way. This will also go a lot smoother if you let yourself be honest right now. If you look back at all of your adult relationships, how did they start? What happened after the phase of commitment? And how did they end? Are you starting to see a pattern? I know, it's crazy. Today's fieldwork assignment is simple and it helps you arrive at a critical piece of data. Whether your source belief pattern originates from abandonment or rejection, you're going to use the space in the fieldwork section to craft a powerful Eli question to counteract your relationship commitment pattern. And of course, make a clear mental note of whether you resonated with the abandonment pattern or rejection pattern. And no, it cannot be both, I promise. Here we are on day 19, exploring triggers, communication. Too loud, too quiet, brutally honest, people pleasing, poor timing, eye roller, aggressive hand gesture. You get the picture. We all have a specific way that our body, brain, and mouth shows up in communication exchanges. This is both a result of our triggers and a communication trigger itself. Communication refers to the sending or receiving of information. This infers two or more people are generally involved in communication. For this reason, it's important that we evaluate not only how we show up in communication, which will be someone else's trigger, but how we get triggered in communication. Communication skills, if left to their own default settings, can do a ton of the heavy lifting as it relates to our relationship, parenting, and career chaos. By understanding how we both trigger others and get triggered in communication, we become able to rapidly disrupt the cycles, shifting them towards a positive and productive outcome. Rewiring communication cycles holds the key to rapidly transforming relationships as well as parenting and career outcomes. Communication is the biggest trigger for most of us because we simply can't avoid it. If you want to get your basic needs met, be loved, or resolve something that is confusing or conflicting, you have to communicate. So you guessed it, you have to go back to childhood to determine what core assumptions would negatively impact your communication skills. When you think back to childhood communication, did you feel misunderstood, ignored, minimized, put down? Or how about coddled, praised, made the center of attention, not held accountable? Did you feel what you had to say didn't matter because people were untrustworthy or wouldn't follow through? Each of these experiences is an input, and your brain will use this information to assume the rules of engagement as it relates to communication as an output. Understanding this assumption pattern and subsequent response will drastically shift your ability to respond the way you choose rather than simply be triggered. Communication triggers include topics like bills, parenting, sex, asking for help, etc. Body language, subtext, and timing. It's important for you to understand what triggers you and what assumptions are attached to that trigger. I'll use myself as an example to illustrate this concept. I am well aware that one of my biggest communication triggers is having to discuss sharing finances or someone owing me money. My childhood core belief is that people are generally untrustworthy and don't follow through. If we take this core belief and use it as an input to my communication pattern, what might we be able to infer? If I don't trust people to follow through on financial commitments, I might be more likely to avoid the conversation entirely, play it off in a minimizing or playful way so that I don't feel abandoned, or approach it with my assumption making me sound insinuating or rude. As we learned on a previous day, how I respond to a communication trigger is someone else's communication trigger. You have to understand in great detail what sets you off so that you can be ready to shift your responses in the moment by using Eli. On this sheet, you're going to figure out how you trigger others. So, going through each category, you're going to highlight everything that applies. And then Once you have this all highlighted, you can identify clearly the way that you trigger the people around you in communication. Now, on this page, it's going to be your triggers. So, everything that you highlight in this page is going to be the way that you become triggered in communication. We all have communication triggers. They might as well be a massive red button on our forehead. Yet, some of us bury our head in the sand and either pretend that they don't exist, or we find ways to justify that that's just who we are, or our family is just that way. These types of excuses might make us feel better about the outcome in communication because it becomes easier to assign blame. But the truth is, it doesn't lead to a productive life of momentum and transformation. By deciding, I am this way, you block any pathway for yourself to gain access to new experiences or outcomes. Today's exercise helps us to hone in on how we trigger other people in communication, as well as how we are triggered by other people. Here is what we can do to intentionally shift out of these triggering communication behaviors. You're going to want to swap it out for something completely different. So, example one, if you tend to be long winded, how can you adapt to try to summarize or streamline the point you're trying to make so that it lands? Think of each communication like the passing of a football. The goal is to get the other person to catch the football, but we often don't communicate clearly about what we are throwing and where we're throwing it to, only to get angry if the ball wasn't received. This is the moment that you recognize that you can shift your communication strategy while still being entirely authentic in who you are. Example number two, you circled your eye roll and often formulate your response while the other person was still talking. It's now officially time to mind your eyeballs. If you usually eye roll, be intentional about catching yourself before you do it. Hint, knowing what points in conversation make you eye roll is key. It's also now time to listen. Your brain is tricking you into thinking that you're going to forget your comeback if you don't interrupt, or like you're going to to plan the next thing you say before the other person finishes, when in fact, it's probably part of the reason you'll continue fighting for another hour. Example 3. You circled that you don't allow for temporary non-agreement and or you go into communication only with the intent the other person has to see it your way. This is a massive opportunity to pull all of the skills you've already learned to work. You know that perception of reality is subjective. So how can you work harder to see or understand their perspective without getting triggered? How can you authentically communicate your perspective without having to prove that theirs is wrong or invalidating to you? What can you do to take radical personal responsibility in the moment to help them see that you're trying to get on the same page? So now you're going to want to make sure that your selection is different and it's not just another triggering response. So, example one. You may keep an argument going for 4 hours, constantly rehashing what's already been said. It might be easy to trick yourself into believing that something different here is being short or abrupt and walking away. That's just another trigger entirely. The solution here is to figure out how you can authentically communicate your point, allow for both parties to share their perspective, stay in the present moment, not keep bringing up the past or previous portions of the conversation, and allow for an endpoint that isn't necessarily one person wins and one person loses. The goal here is to find the sweet spot. Stay present and engaged, working on understanding or collaborating until it is complete or no longer productive. When it's no longer productive, this is your chance to point this out in a way that opens up the conversation to what both parties want to do next before you just leave abruptly or try to manipulatively force the other person to stay. Example two, you tend to be a loud talker. You might even yell when you're passionate, and the other person often describes you as aggressive. The different you're going to do here is an even voice tone that is consistent and audible, not to suddenly shift into being quiet, withdrawn talker. It's not uncommon for someone's brain to think, oh, then I'll do the exact opposite, which is still intended to garner the same chaotic outcome as your default behavior. Think of this exercise like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We're going to be authentic, balanced, and present, not any of the reactive extremes. Example 3. If you're the person that finds themselves strategizing about when to bring something up, this one's for you. Strategizing with time can make your communication attempt feel like an ambush. It can also make you come across as inauthentic. It's important that you find it in yourself to communicate your thoughts, needs, and boundaries when they are relevant and contextualized whenever possible. Holding on to them until a spouse has worked out, for example, so they get less angry, usually does what? Makes them more angry. You probably get the, how long have you felt this way? Or why didn't you tell me sooner? These can be easily avoided by choosing something different. The cautionary tale here is not to make the different blurting it out in a random or abrupt way, and especially not in a crowded area or a work environment around other people. Think of the different here as determining the truth of what you need to say and finding the soonest practical opportunity to share the communication rather than holding on to it or blurting it out randomly. Day 20, awareness versus action. How to make the most of your next 10 days. Mindfulness is certainly a buzzword these days in the health and wellness industry. And let me tell you, I've met a lot of mindful assholes throughout my entire journey in the space. Becoming mindful or aware is certainly a step in the right direction. However, it's absolutely not enough. We can't just become aware we are being a crappy human and doing nothing. We have to follow that up with action. In many cases in this industry, not only have I seen a trend toward mindfulness without action, I've seen mindfulness followed up by justification or rationalization of the crappy behavior. That's going to be a massive no thank you for me. That sort of false light ego trap this industry is riddled with is not the end game we're playing here. I often tell my students at the beginning of the School of Sustainable Self Mastery that the biggest roadblocks to healing is the fear of how much new responsibility they'll have to take once they understand the why behind their actions. Once they know better, they have more responsibility to do better. This is a responsibility that many people don't want. It's easier to just passively slide through the day pretending that they're just the victim or the world is out to get them. Don't fall into the trap of mindfulness without action. We can't just be a bunch of mindful assholes.
Awareness versus action. In order to avoid falling into the typical false light healing trap, you have to be focused on using your newfound awareness to generate actionable items to rewire in a sustainable way. This means getting clear on how your brain tricks you into justifying or rationalizing your old behavior or emotional responses. At this stage in your work, you can't just go into a communication aware of how you're trying to ace your partner to get your emotional fix. You have to change the way you approach and respond in the communication. Many of you have tried to cross this threshold unsuccessfully in the past, and I'll tell you why it didn't work. Moving from awareness to action requires an acute and accurate understanding of the pattern to inform the action. Without this bridge, many of the actions the brain directs you to take are simply alternative pathways back to your fix. It's frustrating, right? Additionally, many of you tried to change your behavior from books last time. It's not uncommon to find yourself knowing consciously what step to take, but when you try to take that conscious action, your subconscious hijacks you into doing the same damn thing you always do. When you create your action steps, you will make sure that they directly correlate to and rewire the subconscious pattern that currently run your brain on autopilot. You will even spend time addressing how your brain will attempt to trick you into justifying it even when you know better. The earliest phase of this workbook were dedicated to generating awareness, and now our number one goal is action. It's important to remember that in order for this to become a sustainable transformation, action needs to be the goal consistently. This can't be focused on 2 to 3 times per week while allowing your brain to default back to its old ways the rest of the time. Each time you allow yourself to fall back into the old pattern, you give it fuel to strengthen. Conversely, the more consistent you are with taking action from this point forward, the weaker the default pattern becomes, and you get one step closer to true mental freedom. Freedom is a state of mind, and true mental freedom only exists outside of the cave your default pattern has held you captive in all this time. The bridge, awareness to action. So on the left-hand side, marked awareness, you're going to go over the last 20 days and decide what you've become acutely aware of. Take this time to quantify your answer with 3 key items that you've become aware of in each category: radical personal responsibility, triggers, illogical beliefs and assumptions, On the right-hand side, labeled Action, again, you're going to go over the last 20 days and decide what you have learned to take action on. You're going to choose 3 items and commit to taking action in each category: radical personal responsibility, trigger responses, incremental goals to rewire illogical belief assumptions. Becoming aware of your bad habits, faulty assumptions, and chaotic pattern behavior is only step 1. Being aware of your chaos doesn't necessarily mean you're able to change it, stop it, or do anything except feel frustrated with yourself. This is one of the biggest problems in the self-help space today. Our goal is to not make you a more mindful asshole. We want you to understand what is required to rewire the subconscious pattern itself so that you don't just know better, you do better. In today's assignment, it teaches you how to reflect over the past 19 days of fieldwork to determine what you've become aware of. This awareness is broken into 3 categories: radical personal responsibility, triggers, and illogical beliefs and assumptions. The second phase of today's assignment helps you to organize your strategies for rewiring each section. The 3 categories of rewiring strategies include starting the new approach and commitment statement, Eli questions that disprove or disrupt the trigger, and incremental goals that help you disprove illogical beliefs and assumptions. Make sure to spend time and attention on the left side of the page describing the awareness items. Attention to detail and specificity on the left side will certainly help you with powerful rewiring tool summaries on the right-hand side. Keep in mind that writing down the rewiring summaries on the right side is just the start. Now that you have these, you have to act on each of these items daily with as high a level of accuracy as possible. When you can hold yourself accountable to these action steps with 90 to 100% accuracy for 30 days, your subconscious will release the old pattern and adopt the new, rewired one. The deep work with the self-study takes place for the 30 days after you complete the book. This is when you have to act on everything that you've learned, hold yourself to the highest standard of personal responsibility, awareness, and action to rewire sustainably.